She had been shunned by his family, yet years later she was the only one to attend his funeral. She had sworn never to speak his name again. But when she heard he would never return, she was the first to arrive. At dawn, the cemetery in Paraty was veiled in a fine mist, the kind that feels heavy in the air. The rain fell gently, unhurried, carrying the scent of wet earth mingled with the distant salt of the sea. The ground was scattered with leaves dissolving into shallow puddles. Clara Menezes held a black umbrella in her right hand and a small bouquet of lilies in her left. She walked slowly, the sound of her heels muffled by the mud. The burial had already ended, or perhaps had never truly begun, for no one else was there. Only the gravedigger, retreating in silence, and a freshly covered coffin with a temporary wooden marker. She stepped closer. The wood still shimmered with moisture. She read the name with the solemnity of someone afraid to speak it aloud. Rafael Monteverde. That string of letters felt like an old wound. The sound of the sea seemed to rise from within her. For a moment, time paused. The wind lifted the veil of rain that clung to Clara's face, and the umbrella was wrenched from her grip. She let it go, unmoved, stood still, watching the grey sky fold over the cemetery. Her wet hair clung to her skin, and she made no effort to brush it away. It felt as if every drop falling on her washed away something she had never had the courage to face. Behind her, a woman watched from a distance, shielded by a dark car parked at the gate. The fogged window blurred her face, but Clara sensed, without knowing why, the weight of that gaze pressing on her body. An old gaze, familiar, the kind of presence time cannot erase. She laid the bouquet on the still fresh soil, one of the lilies tipped sideways, now stained with mud. Clara knelt to fix it, and in that moment noticed something that stole her breath. A small envelope, half buried, caught among the flowers. It was damp, crumpled, and bore handwriting she would recognize even with her eyes closed. The note read only, "For when she returns." Clara kept the envelope in her hands, unopened. She felt the cold wind seep through her coat, crossing her skin, as if time itself passed through her. And then, without realizing it, the sea roared louder in the distance, as if the entire past had risen with it. But she did not yet know that everything would begin at that very moment. Clara Menezes' studio stood on a narrow street in Paraty, tucked between colonial houses with tall windows and ivy-covered walls. Mornings there had a sound of their own, the creak of old hinges, the whisper of the sea mingling with the rhythmic tap of a brush against a jar. She lived alone. Solitude had become a form of order. She rose early, brewed coffee in an iron kettle, opened the windows to let the salty air fill the house, and for a few seconds watched the light spill across the tiled floor. Always the same ritual, precise, nearly silent. Along the main wall, dozens of canvases rested one against the other, portraits, still lifes, fragments of other people's lives. The work of a restorer demanded patience and a steady hand, but above all it demanded detachment, the understanding that her role was to return time to others, never to herself. That morning, the phone rang just as she was removing the varnish from a 19th century painting. The metallic sound broke the brush's rhythm. She answered with the calm voice of someone who no longer expected surprises. It was the assistant of an antique dealer in São Paulo. There was a damaged canvas from a recent auction, and the owner insisted only she could restore it. "It was recommended by someone who deeply admired your work," said the woman on the other end of the line. Clara hesitated. She rarely accepted commissions from outside the city. She preferred restraint, the slow rhythm of Paraty, but the voice had a tone, persistent, almost personal. 2 days later, a delivery truck stopped in front of her door. A young man carefully brought in a well-protected canvas, placed it on the table, and asked for her signature. She sliced the brown paper with a fine blade. Beneath the layers of wrapping, the back of the canvas appeared, and there, written in pencil, a name, Monteverde. The air inside the studio seemed to thicken. Clara froze, fingertips still resting on the wood. The name echoed like an old noise cutting through time. Her first instinct was rational. It could be a coincidence. Monteverde was a common enough surname to appear anywhere, but the seal in the lower corner of the stretcher erased any doubt. Private collection, Monteverde family, São Paulo. She sat slowly, her hands cold. For years, she had avoided any memory linked to that name. She had changed cities, phone numbers, circles of friends, but fate, or something that resembled it, seemed to have a cruel sense of humor. She opened her notebook and wrote the date, as she always did when beginning a new piece, then stared at the blank page, pencil hovering in the air. She couldn't write the title. The following afternoon, a woman appeared at the studio door. She wore mourning, but not the kind born of fresh loss. This was an old grief, faded with time. "Are you Clara Menezes?" Clara nodded. "I'm Helena Monteverde." The name was delivered with a firmness that allowed no retreat. "My brother passed away 3 days ago." The silence between them stretched on. I'm sorry," Clara murmured, barely audible. Helena studied her carefully, like someone inspecting a painting for retouches. "I doubt that, but regardless, he left something for you." From her bag, Helena retrieved a folded envelope, yellowed at the edges. Clara recognized the handwriting before even touching the paper. "He said that if you ever came back, this should reach your hands." Helena waited for no reply. She placed the envelope on the table, glanced around as if the space were too small to hold the past surrounding them, and left. Clara sat there, listening to the distant sound of waves hitting the dock. The envelope lay before her, stained by time, heavy like an unresolved memory. She opened it gently. Inside, a single handwritten page. "If destiny is kind, she will see the portrait of the garden. And then, she'll understand what I never could say." The paper trembled in her hands. The portrait of the garden. She vaguely remembered a painting Raphael had started but never finished, a canvas of diffused light, swaying leaves, the invisible sound of a piano drifting from the house. She had never known what it meant. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She sat before the newly arrived painting, under the amber glow of the lamp, studying the cracks in the paint, the marks of time, as if they might hold the answers. The sound of the clock ticked with cruel precision. At 3 in the morning, she rose and opened the windows. The soft rain still fell. Outside, Parity slept under a blanket of mist. The wind carried the scent of the sea, mixed with the aroma of drying paint. She closed her eyes. She knew that the painting, the name, and the letter hadn't arrived by chance. And in that moment, between the rain's whisper and the rustle of leaves in the courtyard, something within her stirred for the first time in years. An impulse, a quiet certainty that the past, no matter how distant, always finds a way back. The following days unfolded as if time had forgotten how to move. The light that poured through the studio windows no longer brought its usual calm. It seemed to echo a growing restlessness, slowly seeping into the air. Clara worked before the painting, like someone handling a secret. With each layer removed, the garden emerged more clearly, undulating leaves, oblique light, the outline of a slightly open gate. But beyond the painting, there was something else, a silence that watched her from within the canvas. On the 4th day, the doorbell rang. Still in her pigment-stained apron, Clara wiped her hands on a cloth and answered the door. On the other side stood the Monteverde family lawyer, dark suit, reserved eyes, a demeanor caught between duty and discomfort. "Miss Menezes?" he asked, bowing slightly. She nodded. "I'm Augusto Vasconcelos, representing the Monteverde family. I'm here to deliver a document. It was a direct instruction from Mr. Raphael before his passing." His voice was so composed it sounded rehearsed. In the studio's small office, he opened a folder and took out a sealed, letter-headed sheet. "It's a testamentary clause. Mr. Raphael left an item in your care." "An item?" "A journal, ma'am, and a condition that you read it here, at this address." Clara felt the weight of his words, as if the past was being returned to her, not in memories, but in obligations. "May I ask why?" Augusto adjusted his glasses. He believed words shouldn't travel, that some truths only make sense where they were born. He opened the folder again and pulled out a leather-bound notebook. Its edges were worn, and the fabric bookmark bore a dark ink stain. As Clara took it, the faint scent of wood and dried paint reached her. The leather felt familiar. Raphael had used identical notebooks back in his São Paulo days. "Is there anything else, Doctor?" "Only this. He asked that you decide the painting's fate after reading." Augusto closed his folder, thanked her, and left as quietly as he had arrived. His footsteps faded into the distant chime of church bells. Clara returned to the table and placed the journal on the linen cloth. She stared at it for long minutes, as though opening it meant crossing a threshold. When she finally did, the pages gave off a faint scent of rust and salt. The first entries were about work routines, exhibition ideas, dates. Then the writing began to stretch, turning more personal. Time lost its weight when she left. "There is a kind of silence that doesn't come from the world. It comes from within, and it erases even the sound of your own name." Clara's hands trembled. She recognized the rhythm of his writing, the way he used ellipses like breaths. She turned more pages. "If one day she returns to touch my colors again, perhaps she'll understand. The painting was what remained of what I never knew how to say." The sun had begun to set when Clara looked up. Across the studio, the painting seemed to shift in tone. The golden hour spilled through the window and lit the canvas, revealing a faint shimmer where once there had been only shadow. She stepped closer, tilting her face. Among the painted leaves, almost imperceptible, a human figure began to emerge, a profile. The outline of a face nearly lost to time, her own. The impact was quiet. There was no theatrical surprise, no sudden tears, only the sound of breath, brief, uneven. She stepped back, watching. The figure seemed to gaze back at her. That night, Clara wandered aimlessly through the streets of Paraty. The wet cobblestones mirrored the glow of lanterns hanging from balconies. The town, in its stillness, felt like it was waiting. She stopped at a small cafe still open, ordered a cup and sat by the window. On the other side of the glass, her reflection mingled with the painting that still lingered in her thoughts. "Miss Menezes," a voice broke the silence. She looked up. Helena Monteverde stood before her, dressed in black, her hair pulled into a bun that revealed the stern features of their lineage. "I didn't expect to see you here." Her voice was dry but not hostile. "Neither did I." Helena pulled the opposite chair without asking. "I thought a lot before coming." Clara said nothing. "I didn't come to apologize, nor to ask forgiveness. I just needed to know why you went to the funeral." Clara traced the rim of her cup. "Because he was gone." And because no one else would go. Helena studied her long, searching for falsehood in her words. She found none. "He loved you, you know, even when he hated everything else around him." Clara held her gaze. Love didn't save him. Helena turned to the window. The rain had started again, thin, persistent. "No, but maybe it saved you." The silence that followed was not tense, but full. Two women bound by the same emptiness. When Helena rose, she left a small card on the table, the address of the old family home. "Go there. There's something you need to see." Clara stared at the card for a while. Outside, the rain grew heavier. The light above the counter flickered twice before settling into a steady glow. Back in the studio, she opened the journal again. Tucked between the pages, she found a folded note. "If she returns, show her the portrait of the garden. The rest lies beneath the mirror." She rose and inspected the painting more closely. In the bottom corner, the lamp's reflection revealed an uneven surface. She ran her fingers over it. The hollow sound hinted something had been hidden. With a palette knife, she began to loosen the back panel. A small piece of paper, carefully folded, fell onto the table. On the back, a single stroke of blue paint. On the front, a short sentence in his handwriting. "The mistake was letting others speak for me." The rain lashed harder against the windows, and the studio clock struck midnight. Clara sat once more, eyes fixed on that blue line, as if each detail of that color held everything that had once been left unsaid. The next morning arrived unhurried, draped in a sky the color of lead. The sea broke slowly against the pier, and the wind carried the bittersweet scent of almond trees surrounding the house. Clara woke before dawn, not from insomnia, but because her body felt laden with something it could not yet name. She sat at the edge of the bed and remained still, listening to the ticking of the old clock on the nightstand, the same sound that had accompanied her for years and now seemed like a quiet reminder of the time she had tried to forget. Raphael's letter lay open on the table. The blue ink had darkened overnight, and the edges of the paper curled softly from the damp. Clara ran her finger across the words. They were few, but they carried a weight no amount of years had lightened. The mistake was letting others speak for me. The sentence felt like a half-open door, a request to return, a confession arriving too late. As the coffee boiled in the kitchen, she looked at the garden painting leaning against the wall. The morning light, still soft, made the canvas seem alive, as if the wind outside was moving the leaves within it. She decided she would return to the old Monteverde house, not out of curiosity, but necessity. Art and love, she thought, share the same fate. Both ask someone to truly see what was once forgotten. The road to the estate was narrow, lined with ancient trees. The recent rains had turned the ground into a mosaic of reflections. When the gate appeared at the end of the bend, Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She hadn't returned since the day she was cast out, not with words but with silence. The house still stood imposing, though time had dulled its luster. The windows were closed, the shutters layered with dust and dry leaves. She knocked. The sound echoed inside, as if it traveled through corridors too long. An elderly woman answered the door, likely an old housekeeper. Her wrinkled face bore traces of recognition. "Miss Clara," she said, surprised. "I came at Helena's request." The woman nodded and stepped aside. The air inside was dense, filled with wood, paper, and memories that refused to leave. Clara walked the hallway. The walls were adorned with paintings, landscapes, portraits, still lifes, all part of the family's collection. At the far end, she spotted a piano draped with a white sheet. She brushed the fabric with her fingertips, remembering the music he once played on nights when the world seemed to make sense, if only for a moment. In the main room, she found the garden portrait hanging at the center of the wall, surrounded by smaller frames. It was the same painting now in her studio, but this version, the original, perhaps the first attempt, held subtle differences. The leaves were darker, the gate slightly more open, as if offering passage to something the other canvas only suggested. She stepped closer. Beneath the glass, she saw Raphael's signature, a fine, faded line, followed by a date. The same month everything had fallen apart. "He made two versions," said a voice behind her. Helena stood at the doorway, arms crossed. "This one stayed here. The other he kept hidden, said he would only finish it when you forgave him." Clara turned slowly. "I didn't know there were two." He didn't know he'd never have time to paint the third. Helena walked to the window and drew back the curtains. The grey morning light revealed dust suspended in the air. "After you left, he changed." He locked himself in the studio. Didn't speak to anyone, he only wrote. She paused. "When he fell ill, he still asked for news of you." Clara kept her eyes on the painting. "I changed too," she said quietly, almost to herself. "But I never knew how much." Helena approached, studying her. "He left something else. Not with the lawyer. Here." She opened a drawer and pulled out a dark wooden box. "He said it should be given to you when the painting was restored." The box was locked, but a small key dangled from the inside of the lid. Clara turned it gently. Inside were tubes of paint, a worn brush, and an old photograph. In the photo, she and Raphael stood in front of the same garden, laughing at something time had since erased. The image trembled under her fingers, as if the present's light couldn't quite hold the memory. At the bottom of the box, a folded note. Not all works are finished. Some simply rest until someone sees in them what was lost. The words were simple, but their echo expanded in her chest. The air in the house thickened, saturated with the past. Clara closed the box and thanked her, unable to look at Helena again. Outside, she paused in the garden. The same wind that rustled the leaves in the painting swept through the trees, real, cold. The flowers were withered, yet still carried their scent. She sat on the stone bench and stayed there until the sun began to set. The distant sound of the sea mingled with that of the piano, or maybe just a memory. Back in the studio, she lit the warm yellow lamp above the table and placed the restored painting before her. She removed the protective cloth, watching the soft sheen of its surface. She picked up the old brush from the box and dipped it in blue paint. There was no intention to create, only to understand his gesture. The color spread across the palette, dense, vivid. She drew a fine line along the bottom edge of the canvas, a line that changed nothing in the image, but completed something invisible. The gesture was simple, almost imperceptible, but it echoed, as if, somewhere, a promise had finally been fulfilled. When she stepped back, the light had changed. The lamp's reflection turned the painting into a mirror, and for an instant, as she looked at it, Clara felt Raphael was there, not as memory, but as presence. She said nothing, simply stood still, breathing. The sound of the sea returned in the distance, and the night, calm and unhurried, seemed to declare that the time of ghosts was only just beginning. The days that followed seemed to dissolve into a time without measure. Parity was cloaked in a damp winter, and the mornings arrived wrapped in that kind of mist that makes everything move slower, the kind of light that makes even the nearest things feel far away. Clara no longer restored paintings for others. The studio had become a suspended space between past and present. The windows remained open, but the air inside was thick, heavy with memory. Raphael's journal was now nearly read through. On every page, fragments of the man she once knew, and another she had never quite understood. In one of the final entries, the tone shifted. The handwriting turned uneven, as if written in haste. They told me she wouldn't bear the weight of the truth, that it was better to leave her angry than afraid. I believed them, and that was the beginning of the end. Clara read the line again and again, as if its meaning might change with repetition. She knew he was referring to that afternoon in Sao Paulo, their final meeting before the parting. She remembered the sound of rain on the studio windows, the scent of turpentine mingling with the flowers she'd brought. She remembered the cold expression with which he ended it, without explanations, without hesitation. And how, out of pride, she'd said she would never seek him again. Now what once seemed conviction revealed itself as disguised fear. The following week, Helena returned to the studio. She entered without knocking, like someone who no longer feared crossing thresholds. "There's something you need to know," she said without preamble. Clara, still holding a brush, lifted her gaze. "The inheritance. What about it?" "It came with a condition. My father's will. Raphael would only receive his share if he stayed away from you." The silence that followed wasn't surprise. It was confirmation. Helena continued. "He tried to resist, but the old man threatened to cut funding for the art foundation he'd created. He chose to protect the project, said you would understand one day. And I hated him for that," Clara murmured. "I hated him too," Helena confessed, a bitter smile on her lips. "But now I get it. He believed love should be preserved, even at a distance." Clara walked to the window. The light of dusk came through in narrow bands, slicing the floor like copper blades. "None of it saved him," she said, "nor us." Helena set something on the table. "I found this among his papers. It might explain the rest." It was a more recent photograph, taken just months before his death. Raphael stood in front of the same garden painting, now aged. Behind him, another canvas, veiled in a white sheet. On the back of the photo, a single line: "The true portrait was never the garden." That night, Clara dreamed. She dreamed of the old house, the piano, light streaming through the shutters. She dreamed of him seated at the keys, fingers hovering, not playing. When she woke, it was still deep night. She turned on the lamp and walked to the painting. The lamp's reflection made it pulse. Suddenly, it struck her, the line from the journal. "What's left is beneath the mirror." She gently moved the canvas. Behind it, the wall was uneven. She knocked with her knuckles, hollow. Using a spatula, she began to remove the plaster. Behind it, a cavity. Inside, another painting, rolled in cloth, tied with twine. Her hands trembled as she unwrapped it. It was the inside of the house, the piano, the windows, and in the background, the reflection of a woman in the mirror. Herself. The figure's gaze wasn't mournful. It waited. The brushwork was raw, almost fevered. At the bottom, his signature, alongside a date, the very day they had parted. Clara pressed her hand to the canvas. She could feel the rough texture, as if the paint had never fully dried. The ground seemed to shift beneath her. At last, she understood. This was the confession he never managed to speak aloud. The house in the painting revealed what he had hidden, that even in breaking he kept her inside the mirror, where time could not destroy her. The next day, Helena returned. She found Clara sitting on the floor, the new painting resting against the wall. "So this was it," she said, gazing at the image. "He never painted for the world. He painted to be remembered." Clara didn't respond. Helena studied her for a moment, then spoke softer. "Maybe now you understand why he never married again." The house fell into silence. Outside, the waves broke against the rocks, and the wind carried the scent of flowers from the courtyard. Helena left slowly. Clara remained, alone. She knew this was the end of something, but also the beginning of a void that was starting to fill. She lit a candle before the painting and let the flame flicker. The light's reflection made the painted face seem to breathe. And in that moment, she understood what Raphael had written in the final lines of his journal. "Art is what remains when love can no longer be spoken." And she, a restorer of all that time destroys, realized that perhaps destiny had given her the most difficult task of all, to restore what silence had erased within herself. The next morning, the mirror painting was returned to the wall. The window stood open, and the curtains swayed with the wind. Clara looked one last time at the canvas before closing the door. She knew there was more to be uncovered, more truths buried beneath the surface. But for the first time in years, the unknown no longer frightened her. It was as if by facing that mirror of paint, she had finally found what she'd been searching for all along, the courage to stay. Time slowed. There were no longer distinct days, only a succession of grey mornings and windy nights slipping past unnoticed. The studio's clock kept marking the hours with its metallic, steady tick, as if reminding the house that life still existed there, even if no one else remembered how to go on. The mirror painting now occupied the center of the main wall. Clara looked at it every night before turning out the lights. Sometimes it seemed to shift. The reflection of the painted woman, her own, took on different expressions depending on the hour, the light. Perhaps it was just the passage of time playing tricks on the paint. Or perhaps it was something more. Raphael's letter, the journal, and the two paintings remained on the table, as if forming a body, an anatomy of memory. Clara began cataloguing every detail, the layers of paint, the crossed-out words, the notes scribbled in the margins. It was the kind of work she had always known how to do, restoring coherence to what was fragmented. But now it was her own life she was trying to restore. One afternoon, a storm rolled in from the sea. Clouds sank low over the rooftops, and the sound of thunder felt like an old conversation resuming. Clara turned off the studio lights and sat before the painting. The scent of rain crept into the room, a fragrance of metal and leaves. The wind slammed the windows. She didn't move. The first bolt struck nearby, and for a moment, lightning lit the room. The mirror's reflection in the painting gleamed with a startling intensity. Clara stood abruptly, overtaken by an impulse she didn't understand. She grabbed the journal, flipping through pages as if searching for confirmation. In the final ones, a nearly faded note. If the storm ever returns, it means something still needs to be said. Her heart quickened. She grabbed a flashlight and examined the painting. The woman's reflection seemed to gaze into the mirror itself. And there, on the painted surface, something caught her eye. Fine cracks forming a vertical line, as if something lay hidden beneath the top layer. Clara leaned in, rain pounding outside. With a fine blade, she began to carefully peel away the upper film. The work demanded precision and calm, but her hands moved with urgency, the urgency of someone standing before a truth that can no longer be delayed. Gradually, beneath the mirror portrait, another image emerged. A garden at night. The same garden from the first painting, but from another angle. At the center, a male figure seated at the piano. On the lid, a sheet of paper painted in blue ink. Clara's breath caught. It was the same note, the same shade of blue. Now, the mirror's reflection became a bridge between the two paintings, between her gaze and his. The storm outside grew louder. The windows trembled and the candle on the desk cast shifting shadows like wandering memories. Clara placed her hand on the canvas. The surface chilled her skin. It was like touching time itself. And then she understood. Raphael's mistake hadn't been the distance or the silence. It had been trying to shrink love into something containable, explainable. The painting hidden beneath the mirror was the final confession. He had painted her absence, not his guilt. Clara stepped back and sank to the floor, exhausted. The rain filled the room. The clock continued to tick, but differently now. Each second pulsed like a living memory. The next day, the storm passed. The sun appeared shyly, reflecting on the wet cobblestones. Clara opened every window, letting the wind cleanse the studio air. The scent of salt returned, carrying with it a gentle feeling of peace. She spent the day in silence, doing no work. She simply wandered among the paintings, watching the light shift, listening to the gulls cry and the old floorboards creak. At dusk, she sat facing the sea. The sky was brushed in shades of copper and violet. She thought of the day she met Raphael, an exhibition, a conversation about imperfection and beauty. He used to say that true love doesn't seek perfection, it seeks persistence. Now, so many years later, she finally understood what he meant. To persist is to endure silence, to wait for truth to ripen. That night, Clara returned to the studio and wrote a letter. The words came slowly, almost effortlessly. Raphael, for so long I feared what I might find if I looked back. Today I realized the pain was simply life's way of calling me home. The garden survived, even without us. And it is there I leave what remains, not of love, but of the hope that still lives within it. She folded the letter and placed it inside the wooden box that held the paints. Then she turned off the light. In the dark, the painting seemed to breathe. For a moment she thought she heard the distant sound of a piano, a slow melody made of just a few notes. She didn't turn the light back on. She let the sound, real or imagined, fill the space, replacing the emptiness with something that finally was no longer pain, but memory transformed. And so, between the hush of night and the murmur of the sea, Clara understood. Silence was not absence. It was the place where truth at last could rest. Morning arrived in silence, the kind that comes before a decision. The rain had lifted, leaving behind a white mist that hugged the ground, blurring everything, the sea, the houses, the outline of trees. It was as if the world had collapsed into a single scene. Clara's house and the studio, now saturated with something not quite peace, but awaiting, dense, matured, almost alive. She spent the morning moving from room to room, touching objects, frames, windows. Everything in her seemed to be searching for a way to say goodbye, not to the house, but to the time that house represented. She knew now what needed to be done. The mirror painting still stood on the easel. The paint, now dry, appeared deeper in the daylight. Raphael's figure, the hidden reflection beneath the garden, now revealed itself clearly. He looked at her, and in his gaze there was tenderness, but also weariness. The tenderness of someone who loves even after the parting. The weariness of someone who tried to save what was already lost. Clara sat before the painting and remained still for a long time. At some point, there was a gentle knock at the door. It was Helena. Her face carried an expression woven from remorse and resignation. "I saw the lights on last night," she said softly, stepping inside. "I thought you might be unwell." "I am," Clara replied, "but it's a kind of pain that doesn't ask to be healed." Helena looked at the painting. "He looks different. He's finished what he started," Clara said, rising, "and so have I." Helena stepped closer, touching the frame but not daring to reach the canvas. "He always wanted you to see it, but he never had the courage to show you." "Fear is a form of love," Clara replied, "one of the saddest forms." The two women stood in silence. The wind drifted through the window, stirring the curtain fabric. The distant sound of the sea seemed to underscore what neither of them dared to say. Then Helena spoke again. "There's going to be a posthumous exhibit in Sao Paulo. They want to gather his work. The family asked for the garden painting to be included." Clara took her time to answer. "That painting doesn't belong to the family," she said finally. "It belongs to what was left between us." "And what was left?" "Silence," she answered, "but not the kind that divides, the kind that teaches." Helena nodded. She didn't press further. Before leaving, she looked once more at the painting. "He used to say you restored what time had destroyed. Maybe now you've restored something time never had the courage to touch." When Helena left, Clara stood before the closed door. The sound of her footsteps faded on the cobblestone street, and the studio returned to what it had always been, a place scented with paint, aged wood, and a life that insists on continuing. That night, Clara sat again before the painting. The candle flickered on the table, casting moving shadows across the walls. The journal lay open, its last pages almost illegible, pulsing beneath the trembling light. There was a final line written in an unsteady but still deliberate hand. "If she ever returns and the sea still exists, tell her that love, when it doesn't end, becomes permanence." Clara read it aloud, and her own voice sounded as if it came from another time. She looked at the painting, and something within her dissolved. No more anger, no more bitterness, not even the old ache, only a gentle exhaustion, the kind that comes after a long crossing. She rose, walked to the window, and opened the shutters. The night was clear, and the moon reflected on the sea like liquid glass. She took the garden portrait, the first one, the oldest, and carried it to the pier. Barefoot on the stones, the cold wind slicing through the air. At the edge of the water, she set the painting down, leaning it against a rock. The sea crept forward slowly, imperceptibly. She stayed there, watching the moonlight shimmer on the canvas, feeling something settle within her. The sound of the sea, the scent of salt, the chill of the wind, everything converging into a single point of stillness. She whispered softly, "You're still here." And then she did what she had always avoided. She cried. Not the restrained weeping of memory, but a full, clean cry that washes the soul. Her tears mingled with the salt water, and for a moment, everything dissolved into one element: pain, time, love, the sea. When the tide touched the painting, she let it go. The wood floated for a few seconds before sinking slowly, as if searching for rest. Clara stayed there until the horizon began to lighten. At dawn, she returned home. The studio was bathed in the white light of daybreak. The mirror painting still stood in its place. She looked at it once more. The woman's reflection now seemed to gaze outward, no longer inward. It was as if in setting the first painting free, she had also freed what had long been imprisoned inside herself. She sat down, took the journal, and in the blank space below his final entry she wrote, "Permanence is what remains when love learns to let go." She closed the notebook, snuffed the candle, and opened every window. The sea air rushed in, filling the room with the scent of morning. Clara breathed deeply, and for the first time felt no absence. She felt presence, not of Raphael, but of something greater. Time reconciled. Love returned to its natural state, silence and light. And so, as the day stretched out over Parity, the sound of the piano she swore she'd heard the night before seemed to return, soft, distant, as if echoing from the walls of the house itself. No one was playing, but the melody was there. Perhaps it had always been. The mornings that followed arrived with a light that felt different, no longer the cold white of past storms, nor the golden hue of old afternoons, but a neutral tone, almost transparent, as if time had chosen only to observe, without interfering. Parity breathed slowly. Winter was beginning to retreat, and the air carried the scent of wet wood, fresh coffee brewing in nearby homes, and leaves gathering in the alleys. Clara had returned to her early morning walks, before the streets filled with voices. She passed the same places as always, yet now they held a new serenity, as if somehow the world had found its way back inside her. The studio, quiet, had become a transformed space. The mirror painting remained in its place, but his presence had shifted in nature. It no longer looked at her, no longer asked for answers. Now it simply existed, still and complete, like a memory that had learned how to stay silent. On the table, Raphael's journal lay closed. Beside it, the old paintbrush, still stained with blue. Clara never washed it. She let the color remain, as if the pigment had become a living trace of what once was love. She began living with a quiet simplicity, restoring small works, teaching young apprentices, speaking little, smiling sometimes. Her face no longer bore the weight of the past, but neither did it deny it. She carried it like a scar one chooses not to hide. One afternoon, as the light slanted through the window, she received a letter. The envelope bore the seal of the São Paulo Gallery. Inside, an invitation, posthumous exhibition, Rafael Monteverde's Final Light. The curator, an old friend of them both, had handwritten a brief note. "He painted you into everything, even when he said he didn't. Come see." Clara tucked the letter into her bag, and a few days later boarded the first bus to the city. The road was long and winding, and the sea, visible in the distance, seemed to follow her, as if destiny still insisted on staying close. The gallery was housed in a restored colonial mansion, white walls, polished concrete floors, the scent of varnish and quiet. She entered without announcing herself. There were few people. The echo of footsteps made the space feel as though it breathed with the visitors. The first painting was a seascape, dated from Raphael's final years. The brushstrokes were restrained, almost translucent. Next came portraits. Men, women, anonymous faces. Yet all of them shared the same expression, the gaze of someone waiting, watching something that never quite arrives. Then, at the center wall, a larger painting. "The Mirror and the Garden," read the plaque. Clara stopped. It was a fusion of the two works she had once restored. The colors blended in a harmony she couldn't name. The mirror's reflection now revealed an endless garden, and within it, two figures. There were no faces, only gestures, an outstretched hand, a glance suggested by the angle of a body, a light that united the two presences without touching. The curator approached and spoke softly. This was his final painting. He worked on it until the very end. "I didn't know," Clara replied. "No one did. We found it later in the attic." "And the name?" "It was written on the back. He called it The Final Light." Clara stood before the painting for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed. The overhead lights reflected on the glass, and for a moment her own face blended into the painting, her reflection within the reflection he had created. Everything seemed to come together in silence, in stillness, in peace. By the time she left the gallery, the sun was already setting. She walked slowly through the streets, listening to the distant hum of the city. There was no nostalgia, no regret, only the sense that life had finally learned the right rhythm. Back in Parity, the studio waited, unchanged. She opened the windows, felt the sea wind fill the room, and did what she always did, turned on the lamp and looked at the mirror painting. But this time, the gesture was different. There was no seeking. Only presence. She picked up Raphael's journal one last time, opened to the first page, and read in silence the line he had written years before. Some loves only understand time when time is no longer waiting. She closed the journal, turned off the lamp, and stepped onto the porch. The sky was clear. The moon reflected on the sea. The sound of the waves was slow, steady, and the air smelled of salt and dry paint. Clara leaned on the railing and stood there, breathing in the present with the lightness of someone who no longer owes anything to the past. Everything in her felt aligned: body, time, memory. When a stronger breeze rose, she turned inward, looked once more at the studio and whispered, not to him but to herself, love remained. It just changed places. And then, gazing toward the horizon, she understood what she had always been searching for: that destiny does not always repair what was broken. Sometimes it simply remakes it in another form, quieter, gentler. The moonlight crossed the window, casting the reflection of a blurred figure onto the floor. Clara walked to the door and before leaving murmured, "And this time I know. It wasn't chance." She closed the door softly. The sound of the sea continued, steady, like a heart that insists on beating after everything. Every love story has a place where it begins again. Sometimes it's a city, sometimes a memory, and sometimes it's simply the moment someone chooses to stay. And you? From where you are now, what story does your heart still need to finish telling?